We are in the subject of the Lordship of Jesus Christ. What a wonderful topic it is. And it's variegated. There are so many different parts and applications and understandings to the Lordship as we grow, we develop as disciples, and we grow past the wonderful experience of Savior. We begin to know Him as Master and Lord and Shepherd, and we're glad to develop this series. This is part number 16, just in case somebody out there is keeping track, and we're glad that you joined us for this session. The teaching of Jesus. What an interesting topic. It's not a series of affirmations to help us be a little bit better of a person. It's not philosophical word games dealing with spiritual mysteries that can't be defined. It's not intellectual gymnastic exercise. But it is the communication of practical salvation. And with it comes His teaching and instructions, very understandable, on how to live this life here on earth as His faithful disciple. And sometimes His teaching is uncomfortable because we do understand. I remember that Mark Twain, the famous author, 150 years ago, was asked by a reporter, "Aren't you disturbed about what you don't understand in the Bible?" He smiled and he said, "No, I'm upset with what I do understand." And that can be our experience as well. We study, and I'll just use the word strive. We study to know accurately what Jesus taught. Not what we hear from someone else, but what is recorded from accurate historians. We also then obey the teaching that we hear and graciously receive. And the things that we agree upon and the things that we like are very easy to receive. It's those other things that we need to learn to receive graciously and completely, things we don't necessarily agree with at first. They're a change. Maybe they're inconvenient. Maybe they're trouble. Maybe they're expensive. And there are things that our flesh doesn't like. When Jesus teaches, there are many powerful elements that come into play. Recorded in Mark chapter 1, verse 22, that it says those who heard Him, and catch this word, were astonished at His doctrine. Now those of you, and I'm in that group that talk, debate, discuss doctrine, very seldom are we astonished with one another. We might disagree, we might be rejecting, we might be appalled, but very seldom are we astonished at somebody's doctrine. But this is the case with those listening to Jesus, so we'll ask the question that's obvious: why? Why would people be astonished with the doctrinal teaching of Jesus? He taught as one who had authority. As one who had authority. He was different than any other teacher before Him or after Him. And it's for this reason. Jesus did not render opinions for discussion. He didn't take a position and give it for your consideration, for you to think about, and maybe you could agree with this. He taught and presented the truth. And it was dynamic. It was firm. It was authoritative because He is the author. So he never said, it's my opinion, I think, I've come to believe. He just made the authoritative statements, and wow, they have an impact, and they astonish us even today. According to Jesus' teaching, and this is carefully crafted as we go through, you'll see, there's a shortage in the hearts of men and women. There is a shortage of mercy in our hearts, in Jesus' opinion. There is a shortage of compassion. And thirdly, there is a shortage of forgiveness. It's very interesting how some people today are put off by the emphasis of Jesus. They have to have an interpreter, a teacher, and somebody as a buffer in between to kind of soften down his rough edges, his sharp tone, or they have to build up his weak spots. Well, those don't exist, in our opinion. But you see, it's different because when Jesus teaches, as a teacher, he's not promoting a book. He's not even concerned about book sales or the tour to, have a book signing party at every bookstore across the nation. He doesn't care about that. That's not his objective at all. Watch carefully as Jesus deals with these three concepts that I've just mentioned in this particular order. Now, I haven't really scratched down deep enough to understand the order in which he teaches this, but I recognize the sequence. Watch how this goes. So from Luke chapter 14, we see that Jesus teaches on mercy. That was the first one we mentioned in the list of three. Dr. Luke is considered one of the most accurate historians of the first century. There have been some problems and some questions through the centuries, but today he has been exonerated and shown how accurate he is for historical details, for geographic details that are just quite impressive. Here Luke records this teaching sequence from Jesus. Luke tells us that Jesus is opposed by some men and takes the opportunity to, as he does, state the truth without a personal attack upon them. And most of us know how difficult that is, that there is a next generation, it seems. Jesus didn't yell at them, although they were in disagreement. He didn't call them any names. He didn't attack their character, and he didn't slander them. Now, those are tools of debate today that are commonly used, usually in two situations. One, the person has no substance to present, and they resort to name-calling, character assassination, slandering, and yelling. That if I turn up the volume, it will make me more believable or more correct, or I must be right because I'm so passionate in my shouting. The second situation that happens is when people have lost the argument. They've run out of material. They've been defeated in the debate, discussion, and they will not concede. So they resort to name-calling. They attack the messenger since they can't attack the message. It's a common technique. Changing the subject is a common technique that people will get for it, or they'll just attack you. A major note: there is a huge difference between the gospel of Jesus Christ and the dead, lifeless ritual of those who only possess a religious belief, a doctrinal position, or a moralistic code of ethics. You can come literally from any philosophy base, any man-made religion base, and create a code of ethics that you sincerely believe in, or a position of doctrine. But let me tell you, without the one who claims to be the way, the truth, and the life involved in it, it's dead and lifeless. And what a difference there is between just religious positions, doctrinal statements, and Jesus' teaching. He teaches the truth. He teaches it with life, and he teaches it in the Spirit. Anyone can easily present what they think about a subject. Anyone. In fact, it's been said this way: did you know that you are the world's foremost authority on your opinion? The world's foremost authority on your opinion. But you know what? We need more than an opinion. In fact, we need more than a correct opinion. We need the truth. What a difference there is. Well, I'm right on this point. Well, that may be. You can be right about things and still be really in a mess. 1 Corinthians 13 said you can present a truth, but if you got the wrong attitude, you're still wrong. You're still wrong. Chief Pharisees. This is one group that is given Jesus some trouble, some opposition. They are prominent in society. They are highly respected. These are the ruling members in the majority of the powerful Sanhedrin Council, which is considered to be what we would call a Supreme Court. The highest court in the land is the Sanhedrin Council. They aren't just some denominational body who sits and makes up stuff. These men, these guys they've got it together, and they are in charge. The lawyers, that's another group that has joined together with the chief Pharisees in opposition to Jesus. These men are the experts. They don't just think they're the experts. They are the experts on the interpretation and application of the law of Moses, when in the complete law, now we're not talking about the limitation of the Ten Commandments, I'm talking about the entire law that was given to Moses by God on the mountain. It includes civil law, criminal law, and ceremonial law, which we would call the religious aspect. And there's no separation between the compartments. These laws are not compartmentalized, but are blended together in a fashion that only God could do. Moses is just recording. God is the one giving. These men were very carefully watching Jesus and what he taught. It says so here. You may be thinking that, well, they're just judging what Jesus had to say in the light of the law of Moses. Of course they were. That's their job. Did you know it's their job to judge and compare people that are teaching in public in Israel? They aren't being mean necessarily. They aren't being, some kind of out of bounds and beyond the limits. It's their job to judge because they know what's in the law. And they want to see if these itinerant teachers, Jesus was one of them in their opinion, are correct. Luke 14:1 states their motivation, however. In this particular case, they were also trying to trap and discredit him. They didn't want his teaching to be accepted. It didn't matter that it was correct. It didn't matter that it was the truth. It didn't matter that he had insight that they had never experienced before. It's relevant to understand why they are doing this to Jesus. They're trying to trap him. Now, these are the people that are smart. These aren't just people with a chip on their shoulder. They have diplomas in their pocket. These people are the creme de la creme, the top of the top, for those who understand the books of Moses. Well, I think it's important to understand, as these people are judging and trying to trap, they did this to everybody. They're not just persecuting Jesus. They did this to everybody. Because Jesus, they know, was not a graduate of their school. He has no credentials as far as they are concerned, and he is a legitimate threat to their position in society, in culture, and at church. He's a threat to them because he's got no credentials. He's just an itinerant rabbi with a following. I'm sure you've seen this particular thing in action somewhere, that you're not permitted to be properly received in order to be popular if you don't operate with certain approved methods and techniques and carry our stamp of approval. He was not approved of these men, of the chief Pharisees and the lawyers. You know why? He didn't even apply. He didn't even try to obtain their approval, but they see him as a challenge to their power structure, their base with the people, and there's some money involved. There's a financial aspect. It's not the only one, but there is a financial aspect in dealing with Jesus' lack of approval from these men. Through the centuries, between Moses and Jesus, men had added many, many rules. And some of them are in application, but they were stern. They were solid. They were accepted at the level of the 636 or somewhere in that neighborhood, over 600 commandments that were given to Moses. And one of my questions comes up, who had the authority to reduce them to 10? Oh, we believe in the commandments. You do? How many? What are you talking about? Well, there's 600 of them. Who gives you the right to say that you follow the law of Moses as a New Testament believer first, and then secondly, why don't you follow all of them? How's there some criteria in your judgment where these you can follow and these you don't have to because they don't relate to our culture and they're not relevant to us today? Who says? If you're going to follow the law of Moses, you got to do all of it. James agrees with me on that. There are two sets of commentaries that have been written by the first-class rabbis through the centuries. They are two sets of books that are I'll just call them gigantic. I've seen them. In fact, I went to the student bookstore at Hebrew University of Jerusalem with the intention of buying these sets of books. One is called the Mishnah, and one is called the Talmud. It's in reference to the whole set and series of commentary books. And I was going to buy these books for my own library, because I wanted these kind of original documents for interpretation and for in-depth study. And also, the main Christian leaders in Pakistan had requested for me to obtain these books and bring them into the country on my next trip to Pakistan. You see, in their country, which is the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, where 97% of the people are Muslim, these books are illegal to possess and illegal to import. They check the shipments of books that come in across the border. You know, we have people that look for fruit and vegetables and animals and things like that at the border. They look for contraband books coming in, and the penalties are severe. The people that requested that of me, they understood the severe penalties if they were caught owning these books in Pakistan, because their foundational understanding of the law of Moses, and I understood the penalties as I was planning to bring them into the country. Well, I ran into two problems. One, the size of all the books was bigger than all my suitcases put together. It was going to be a massive shipping project, and they wanted $3,500 for this set of books. I wanted one for me and one for them. I thought, boy, I'm going to have to change my expectations here. We're going to have to get a summary in a smaller book for a lesser price. Through the centuries, men have added rules to the commandments that were given to Moses. That's very simple. And this is not something that you haven't ever heard of before. One of the main areas of emphasis, and there are others, in the Talmud and the Mishnah is the definition of work permitted on the Sabbath. Because the indicators and the commandments of Moses are that you don't work on the Sabbath. Okay, so the student and the rabbi say, well, what is work? What qualifies? And so out of I believe, a sincere need to know, you got to define. You got to define what is work and what is not. And oh my goodness, it is down to the gnat's elbow and eyelash for defining what this is in their vast wisdom. Among many other things in the definition of work, and it's vast. I would take up the rest of the hour and I still wouldn't cover all of it, but I'll just focus on this one thing. They have defined the act of healing on the Sabbath as work. You can't heal on the Sabbath. Okay. And therefore, it's not permitted, and it is a big deal. It's a very big deal. If you consciously violate the understanding and you begin to work on the Sabbath, you're in trouble, son. You are in trouble. And so we need to know what the definition of work is. They had completely lost sight of two very important things. One, what God actually said to Moses, seems to be lost in the discussion. And secondly, the reality of the needs of the people of Israel. They made things very, very difficult by their microscopic definition. In the study of biblical hermeneutics, and I'm not changing subject, I'm just giving you a sidebar, you find an important sequence that guides sincere Bible students in their study, not toward a particular conclusion, but to provide some guidelines to discover the truth. You see, it's not just a free-for-all. I've been in adult either Sunday school class or Bible study meetings, and their technique was appalling to me. We go down the row, no preparation, no study, nothing in readiness, and go down the row in a haphazard fashion. Sir, would you read the first verse in our selected passage and off your little memory card here, and then tell us what it means to you. Well, the answers that come from that kind of a question are all over the map. And what we understand is this. I'll be as kind as I can. It doesn't matter what it means to you. It matters what it means. Your impression, your interpretation, personally, your insight that only you have, really doesn't matter. Now, I understand it matters to you, but what matters is what the verse means. Not what it means to some person, what it means. What's the definition of the words? Are they taken at face value? Is it a slang term from the first century or from BC somewhere? Is it a euphemism? Is it an analogy? Is it a parable? Is it poetic language? Is it a generalization? There's all kinds of questions to begin to try to understand what this verse means, not what it means to you. So in the 3 rules of hermeneutics, as we study, we find out first, what does it say? The words, the phrases, and the content is there, but we find out accurately, and I mentioned this in the opening, to accurately understand, find out what Jesus taught. Not what somebody thinks he said, but what he actually said. What does it say? Step 2 is, what does it mean? Is there a meaning that is beyond, you know how we have words that don't mean exactly what they are, because it's a phrase that we use that actually means something else. But what does this mean that you're working on? The third part is, does this apply to my life, and how does it apply? Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there are things that are spoken from God to man that was a specific command for a specific purpose. Now, can you just walk in there and appropriate anything in Scripture to your life? You can, but it's inaccurate. So, Jesus said, get out of the boat, Peter, and walk on the water. And so I believe that that's what we're supposed to do. Really? Did he tell you to do that? Well, kinda, yeah. Well, God told Noah to build a boat that took him 100 years to build. Are you doing that too? Why don't you appropriate that to your life? Because God spoke it to a man. Well, why don't you just take that? You see, there's a problem. Did God say it to you? Does it apply to your life? Not everything does. Are you supposed to build a boat? I would say, sir, probably not. Probably not. I don't think you have 100 years to do that, and God didn't clearly speak to you about that. You read it in a historical account. God spoke to Moses with certain things. God spoke to Abraham with certain things. You can't just grab everything buffet style that you like. If you will adopt and follow these guidelines, it'll change and establish your Bible reading, your Bible study in a proper approach. What does it say? What does it mean? How does it apply? Back to the account. Sorry. The sick man that's in this account, here we are on Sabbath. Jesus is teaching. We've got the chief Pharisees, and we got the lawyers present. Now, if that doesn't scare you just a little bit, you probably don't realize who these two groups are. This sick man might have been a plant. Might have been. I'm not going to say he was, but I'm not going to say he wasn't. There's a possibility that he was a plant used by the Sanhedrin Council. Or it's possible that he was just one of those who came and gathered and was permitted in this area where Jesus was teaching on that Sabbath day. Everybody knows it's Sabbath. There's no wondering like, well, did Jesus realize it was Sabbath? Oh, yeah. Everybody knew it was Sabbath. I mean, it's the high focus point of this day. The dilemma presented for Jesus is this. Will he just heal the man, which you know he's capable of doing, thereby breaking the rules for Sabbath? That's against the law in the Pharisees and lawyers' mindset. That's against the law just as much as the thou shalt not list, because they've interpreted that, they've defined it, and they've elevated it to the place of the law, rather than saying, well, this is our opinion and our application. Oh no, it's the law. You can't do this on the Sabbath. So is Jesus going to do this? Now we're trying to think with his brain for a second. Or will he bow to the Pharisees' interpretation of the definition of work on the Sabbath and ignore the sick man's condition altogether, just pretend he's not there? Or say, hey, sir, I see your condition, but I'd sure like to make an appointment with you tomorrow. Because today's the Sabbath and we got these guys here. Either way, the group I'll call the religionists are ready to pounce. It's a trap. It's a trap that's been set. It's cleverly designed and only has bad choices to offer. If Jesus acts, he's in trouble. If he fails to act, he's in trouble. As far as they're concerned, these guys are stroking their beards going, we got him. We got him on this one. Well, maybe not. But the opposers, it seems, are ready for a gotcha. And this is something that is experienced by Christians today. People build these little clever traps and ask a loaded question, and there is no good answer. Or they want 25 words or less, or they really get aggressive with you and they go, answer this yes or no. So, oh no, because it takes more than a yes or no on the trick questions. I got a 5-minute answer for that. Well, they don't want to hear the answer. They don't want to know the answer. They just want to trap you. Well, we see the flashes of brilliance of Jesus as he shows us he is a formidable opponent in the tactics of debate. He's good. He's really good at this. He's thought it out. He knows what they're thinking. He knows what's in their heart. Nothing surprises him. Nothing is sprung on him that he didn't see coming years before. He saw this coming before these guys were born. Jesus chooses to deal with the man right away, and then quickly, before anything can develop, passes the dilemma back to the group of poised enemies. They're ready to jump. He knows it, and he puts it right back in their lap. This is the hot potato technique. And he asks them a question. He doesn't just sit back and wait, like a target. Say, okay, have your way, and they, and they start shooting. Before they shot, he asks them a question. He says, if one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out? And you know what? Luke 14:6 records they couldn't answer. Do you get the contradiction here? This is so strange. These are the men with all the answers to all the questions. These are the guys that you go to when you have a legitimate question, and they know the answer. Between the chief Pharisees that run the Sanhedrin Council and the lawyers, they know the answers. And Luke records they have nothing to say. Now, do you think that all their brains just froze over instantly and they can't think? Oh, they're thinking. They're thinking at 500 miles an hour, they're thinking, every one of them, and they're looking at each other, communicating, and why don't they have an answer? Why? Well, this is, you understand, it's not a tough question to answer if you're seeking the truth, if you're sincerely wanting an answer. But it's a very tough question for those whose intent is to trap Jesus in some little devious game of legalist religion with political implications. Boy, does politics bring out the devious techniques of movers and shakers. Jesus understands there are real emergencies, right? There are real emergencies, and that if the proper help is delayed, it would result in additional serious injury or loss. But he has no understanding for manufactured, contrived, self-created, and staged emergencies. You know, like the guy who says, I don't feel like going to church today. I'm going to push my ox in the ditch. It's a contrived emergency. Well, Moses says if your ox is in the ditch, you got to prioritize that and take care of it. So I won't be at Bible study today. Sorry, my ox is in the ditch. Yeah, but you pushed him in. These guys are in this category. These men are forced to compare their concern for a child or an animal, a work animal, with their concern for a man with true need. In this case, it's abnormal swelling of the body. You see, it's not an injury, it's not a joint, it's not just lame in a leg. He's swelling. His body is swelling abnormally, and if they wait till tomorrow, this guy could die. So, well, why? Well, we don't know. We don't know what's causing. Maybe there's an infection, maybe there's a virus, maybe there's a condition that's going to be worse in 24 hours. And Jesus uses that implication, doesn't he? This needs to be taken care of right away. This is an emergency. Does this sound like a current question for today? I think this relates to our culture, our society, and our lifestyle. Even today, there are real emergencies, and then there's the fake stuff. Wow. Luke continues in chapter 15, the very next chapter. Now you understand, we have inserted the chapter breaks for readability, and so we can find a particular verse. But Luke is just continuing the account. And so in the first 7 verses of chapter 15, Jesus teaches on compassion. Now that's the number 2 item on the list that I gave you at the very beginning. Present are the publicans. The publicans, who are these guys? They are the turncoat tax collectors who worked for the despised Roman government. Tax collectors. They often overcharged in order to collect their fee or their percentage, because Rome didn't have any restriction on that. Here's what we need you to collect from these guys, and then we're not going to pay you a salary. You're going to charge them an extra 15%, so you get paid. But you got flexibility. And so, do you understand what happened with these tax collectors? If they could give a variable addition to the tax that you owe, and you kind of gave them, a bad time at the window, and you called them some bad names, and you said something about their mother, it might be 30%. There's a fee that goes with this insolence. And so here's the result of this. These people were especially hated as they were seen as traitors. These are Jews working for the occupation forces of Rome. They were seen as traitors to Israel as a nation and to God himself. They were despised. These guys were treated like trash. Rightfully so. We got our people working for theirs. Oh, man. No respect whatsoever. They were cut out of the family fortune. They were thrown out of family homes. But oh, they made a good living. The tax collectors made a good living, but they also found out that money doesn't buy everything. The second group that's present is the sinners. We didn't make that up. We didn't contrive that particular term in the 40s or the 50s in this country. It goes clear back here in the first century. The people that are open violators of the law of Moses, who made no pretense of any interest in a religious life or strict observances whatsoever. You mean there were people back then that didn't go to church? That didn't have any regard for the law of Moses? Lots of them. They are the sinners. That's their choice of lifestyle. They had chosen not to be with the Pharisees, not to be a lawyer, not to be a publican, but they're the sinners. I don't need to define them anymore, do I? Jesus visits with these people. He mingles with them. And, see, that's important. And he sits for a meal with these people. Oh my goodness. Oh my, oh my. Well, some of these guys are going to need a fainting couch to fall over and pretend that they just can't handle this. Those men, that are completely immersed in religion as a form, have two grave concerns here. The first is self-contamination. You see, if you have contact with a sinner, oh my goodness, something's going to happen. And they would avoid any situation that could cause them to be termed ceremonially unclean. Now, we're not talking about dirty, grimy, oily, nasty garbage. We're just talking about contact with a person that's a sinner would cause you, as a religious person, to temporarily be prevented from performing religious duties, from offering sacrifice, going into the temple would not be permitted because you are unclean. Well, how do you get clean once you get polluted? Well, there's a process, and it's a pain in the neck. It's a problem. It takes some time, it takes some effort, and you just would rather avoid getting dirty, becoming polluted, than to go through the process to make you ceremonially clean enough to go in to participate in the services of the temple. Does that make sense? And so they avoided these people. They avoided contact. They certainly didn't want to eat with them. They certainly wouldn't want to mingle and fellowship with them. And they don't even want to talk to them. Because there might be, and this is the second major thing, there's an implication. If you talk and mingle and fellowship with these people, the sinners, there is an implication that you approve of their choice of lifestyle, their behavior, and it will damage your public reputation if you're seen talking to a sinner, shaking hands with a sinner, sharing lunch with a sinner. No, 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 no. No, that's just not going to happen. Not going to happen. So they got two major concerns in their way of viewing life. So I'll ask a question based on their perspective. What purpose would fellowship serve? How's that going to benefit us to go hang out with the sinners? I see no upside at all. I see negative as the result all the way around. You see, now we as Christians, and I'm assuming you understand, we don't understand people that are not evangelistic. We just don't understand that because we have contact with the world. We are not in the world, of the world, but we're in the world. But our preaching, our teaching, our ministry often includes sinners. And we don't approve of their lifestyle, but we need to have contact with them to tell them about the gospel of Jesus Christ and the good news that He can do something about their destiny, their situation, and their life. These people are not evangelistic types. They are not interested. I'll go even further. They don't really want any of these icky people in their clean and holy temple. Oh, let's invite them to church. No, don't do that. They're unclean. They'll pollute everybody they have contact with. And so Jesus plays the crossover. He goes and hangs out with them. Oh my. What? And then he thinks he's going to come back and talk to us, being ceremonially unclean? Well, forces emerge. One of the rules, strict rules, of the Nazarene vow, Nazarite vow, let me correct that. The Nazarite vow, you don't cut your hair, and this vow could be taken for a temporary period of time or for a lifetime. Samson was probably the most famous. You cannot drink wine or any fruit of the vine. And the third rule is you must not have contact with a dead body. Those are the Nazarite rules. Why? You can't, because you'll be unclean. And that's just not permitted. Jesus broke those rules. And that third one is one I want to focus on for just a moment. You see, when he saw a funeral procession coming down, and here is a widow who's had enough trouble since she lost her husband, and now she's losing her only son, her only guaranteed future is starvation. Because women can't hold a job. It's illegal for them to work. She has no family to support her. She will starve to death. No wonder she's weeping and wailing. She'll die this week of starvation, or next week. I mean, her whole financial world has just evaporated. Jesus enters in and touches the dead body. Instead of a transition or a communication or a transfer from the dead body to Jesus, making him unclean, he transfers life to the dead body. What a difference! What a difference! That Jesus is not afraid to be ceremonially unclean because these guys are going, oh, are you kidding me? He is going to heal, change, raise from the dead with his touch because of He is going to transmit what He has to them. Do you think anybody ever made Jesus ceremonially unclean? Not one person. Not one person, not one condition, not one dead body, not one contact with a sinner or publican. These are polluted people, but He is going to communicate to them salvation, life, healing, restoration. He is going to be the giver. If you're afraid and you got your kids scared to death of going to the 7-Eleven for a slushie and hearing bad words or being around bad people, you're just going to have to hunker down in your hovel and be afraid the rest of your life. Because it would be the worst thing that could happen to your family for your kids to be an evangelist to a leper colony. Why? Because, things are horrible. They say bad words there and they tell dirty stories. And we're just going to have to stay home and have our own little private Bible study. We can't have contact with those dirty sinners. Jesus can. Why? Because He has life in Him. Let me tell you, if you think the Holy Spirit is in residence within your life and you're afraid of having contact with sinners, maybe you don't have what you say you have. Maybe you don't really understand the power that is within you will change the life of another person if you dare make contact with a person that is unclean. Now, if you don't have that power, if you don't have that Holy Spirit in residence, you better be afraid. You better be afraid, because you need to get it straight with God. You need to be endued with power from on high, and then go and do. Jesus uses a parable. You know, Jesus, when He began His ministry, taught plainly in understandable language, and it made too many people mad, and they were ready to kill Him too soon. And so He moved to parables so that those who wanted to learn and to know could receive, and those that were mystified could go on about their business. Because they'd have killed Him sooner. But it wasn't time yet. So He uses a parable, and we see that Jesus, the shepherd, and His disciples will rejoice over the rescue of lost sheep. Now, even though this is told as a parable, this is pretty easily understandable. Pretty easy to understand. We're the ones who get lost. Jesus is the shepherd who seeks and rescues and saves us. I did not find my way back to the sheepfold. Jesus came looking for me. And He came looking for you. And the people that are in opposition to Jesus in this situation have no interest in being a shepherd. They don't want the lost sheep to be found. They want to abandon them. They want to write them off. They want to not be troubled with dirty sheep having contact with their clean hands. We find a very detailed explanation of this subject in the letter to the Romans written by Paul, the leading theologian of the first century, and I think of every century since then. And his conclusion in chapter 6 is this: all have sinned. Don't give me this hierarchy about you holy, pure, clean people are different than these dirty sinners over here. We have all sinned and come short of the glory of God. I wonder at times, and this is one of my questions when I come to this kind of a thought, who do these people think they are? Who do these chief Pharisees and lawyers and holy folks, who do they think they are? They're certainly not in agreement philosophically, spiritually, practically with the Good Shepherd that is going out to find the one. To find the one. They're never going to do that. They're going to stay safe in their little tent of religiosity and never be interested in bringing a sheep in. But the Good Shepherd is interested. You see, Paul understood it fully. And he was the leading theologian. This is a very good argument that Paul was the most educated, the most intelligent, the most highly trained expert in the law of Moses alive. There wasn't somebody above him in the system that could send him a letter and saying, you need to calm that down, son. He's at the top of the mountain. He's at the top of the heap. And he says, I've received a revelation that we've all sinned. All of us. Now, could you name a sin from Saul of Tarsus? Here's the defender of the faith. Here's a man who he claims to be a Pharisee of the Pharisees. What sin could you lay at his feet? I can't find any. You see, there'll be somebody in your world that this will rock. Saul of Tarsus was not saved from being a bad man. He was saved from being a good man. But being a good man is not enough. Being a good Pharisee, religious, obedient theologian is not enough. Saul was saved from being good. And he said later on, all those credentials that I have, sewage. Raw sewage. They're worthless. They have no value whatsoever. But I have found value in Jesus Christ. The third item on the list is from Luke 17. The first 4 verses Jesus teaches on forgiveness. Now that he's laid down the first 2, here's the third one. The shortage in the hearts of men and women, you remember. So I'll give you first what not to do. There is a word in the original here of offenses. Offenses. It's a very interesting definition for the word offense. This word refers to the part of a trap on which the bait is placed. On which the bait is placed, causing the trap to spring shut. Now, if you lay out, a mouse trap in your home or your barn, and you don't put any bait in it, you don't put any old bacon or maybe peanut butter or some such bait, that trap will probably just sit there for years. Because even a mouse will look at it, realize what it is. I'm not going in there. No, sir, that doesn't look familiar to me whatsoever. But when there's bait, that's completely different than the trap. It's not like the trap at all. When there's bait, we become mesmerized. We become so focused on the taste, the experience, the desire for the bait that we seem to block out having a grip of reality about the trap. We don't see the trap at all. We just smell the peanut butter. And go, I got to have some of that. And you go in for the bait, and the trap springs shut. An offense. You see, you have to give people permission before you can be offended. If you don't give people permission, you can't be offended. You see, it's your choice to be offended in response to the ugly thing they did. But the temptation, the bait, is to be offended. It's not the trap itself. It's the bait. And oh, how easy it is to go for the bait. If there's no bait, you'll see the trap and you'll choose to avoid it. Because you're not mesmerized by the sight, the smell, and the taste, and the possibility, oh man. Because you know, when somebody opens a jar of peanut butter, you can smell it through the whole house. And if they bake those cookies, oh my, you got to leave the house. They're too good to resist. In this teaching, choosing to be offended is the bait. Allowing yourself to be offended, that reflects, how you can be touched, and it reflects your opinion of how important you are, how untouchable you are. Did you know that Jesus is building disciples and those that will be the future leaders of his church? And he teaches them and gives them a strong warning and a caution. Because the church is not going to be made up of all strong, mature Christians. And there'll be a bait put out for you because you expect everybody at your local church to be smart, mature, strong, and they aren't. I know you are, but they're not. And therein lies the bait. And there's a very real trap. Each of us needs to live in such a way to encourage and strengthen the other disciples. I'm so glad they put up with me. The first few years, and few means 10 or 20 or 30, and they put up with me. And they didn't tell me, boy, you are really immature, Mark, and you need to keep your mouth shut. They didn't ever tell me that. They let me grow and learn. Even when they choose to sin against you. Does that happen in church? More than it should. I'll just put it that way. So, we're done with church. No, it's just too much for me. No, I'm not going to tell you that. Don't be done with church. They need you, and you need them. But I'm telling you, there's some bait that you need to recognize and avoid. What to do is the teaching of Jesus understandably contradicts the rules of the world. Unbelievers teach that if someone offends you, revenge is the proper and encouraged response. You've heard it. I don't get mad. You might have seen it on the big alligator picture. I don't get mad, I get even. Yeah. That's what the world promotes. And Jesus' teaching contradicts that concept. Now, when you are offended, when you are sinned against, don't take the bait. Don't respond with revenge. Jesus teaches his followers this. And this is plain. You'll find it in Luke 17. Rebuke those who sin against you. Don't say, well, I understand. Well, I have compassion, and therefore, it's all good. It's all good. It's all okay. No, sometimes it isn't. He says, rebuke them who sin against you, and forgive those that are repentant. That doesn't mean you're harboring a grudge. Doesn't mean that you're saving forgiveness for people, but you forgive those that are repentant. So, oh, Mark, I don't believe that. Well, that's what God does. Do you think he has forgiven sin of those who are unrepentant? No. Is forgiveness available? Absolutely. Forgiveness is available. But if they are unrepentant, they are unforgiven. You don't get forgiven for things that you have done that you don't take responsibility for. So, well, Oprah doesn't say that. Indeed. But she says she's a Christian. Well, she's not this kind of a Christian. Clearly, forgiveness is to be given freely, gladly, and often, even to repeat offenders. Well, I'll forgive you this time, Larry, but next time, boy, Katie, bar the door, I'm going to punch you in the nose. Even if they do it again on the same day, you forgive them. You forgive the repentant. That's clear from Luke 17. I know it contradicts what you've been told, but here's what Jesus is telling you. Personal application. Luke 14 is mercy. Luke 15 is compassion. And Luke 17 is forgiveness. That's Jesus' sequence of what he wants to create, to encourage, to engender within our hearts. So, well, I've been a Christian since 1947. I'm happy for you. But you still need these three things in your heart more than what you have. God bless you tonight. I hope that you join us again for another session with the Lordship of Jesus Christ. Amen.
This program has been produced by A Life Devoted to Ministry, Ltd. Production, and is home of Training Trainers to Lead. We hope you enjoyed this program. For more information or to support our ministry, please visit ldtms.org.